Welcome again to Cottage Talk. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. This is our post-match show of Fulham's 3-1 victory against Sunderland at the Stadium Light on Sunday. I did a full-time show, which I just shared my initial reaction, but this is in more detail. This is our post-match show. So for the next hour, Tony and I will be breaking down this match and going through everything that we learned from the match and the Cottage Talk talking points, just stuff we want to talk about, and then also going through the match itself. So we got a lot to get through in regards to talking about this 3-1 victory. Well, I won't waste any more time. Mr. Gold, how you doing?
I'm very well, Russ. How are you doing? You good?
I'm doing good, my friend, except I mentioned to you, I don't want to open up the blinds behind me. But as I said, I've got about 17 inches of snow on the ground. It's still snowing here. So I do like a little snow, but not this. There's a tremendous amount of snow. So I'm not really enjoying that too much, but it is what it is. But you know what? Regardless of all that, I'm excited to talk to you about this match. You and I were discussing it yesterday, but now we can go into more detail. Before I share my view, give me your opening thoughts about this victory here.
Well, first of all, kudos to you because I think you called it.
I did call
3-1. I certainly did not see that come in, to be perfectly honest. But look, we talked about, if Marco Silva got the team selection right, if the players turned up and approached the game in the right way and got on the front foot and Sunderland had to be off their game a little bit, then, Fulham could definitely get something from it. And it proved that way. In the end, to be perfectly honest, the first half was utterly diabolical from both sides. And there really wasn't anything great to talk about. It was a really dour sort of game and performance that, probably better watching paint dry. But second half, they got their act together. And you know what? We took advantage. And, you can only beat what's put in front of you at the end of the day. And full credit to Fulham for, showing the qualities that they've got. And we talked about the midfield, Russ, and we talked about how important it was to win that battle and be really solid in there. And I thought in the end, we dominated that area of the pitch, and ultimately it won us the game.
It did, Tony. It absolutely did. And we'll, like I said, we will really break it down. And what's interesting about this, and we'll go through it in the talking points, it will definitely come up. But one of the reasons why I predicted 3-1, which I think many might find shocking, right? How did I predict that based on the history, based on, I kept hearing about the losses just recently, the poor form and all this, but I watch all the matches and I could see that I had a feeling that the matchup was going to be favorable to Fulham, which it turned out to be. I saw that the first time the clubs played each other. I just had a feeling that Marco would have a good game plan to play against Sunderland and be able to let the players be put in the right position to succeed. And I think we saw that. We'll talk about in more detail of exactly how he set the team up. But that to me is what gave me confidence. And I just saw the amount of depth that we had recently, and I'm thinking this is all pointing towards a Fulham victory. And I got proven right. It wasn't easy. 3-1, I think in some ways you could say flattered us a little bit, but you know what? They deserved all 3 points, Tony. That's what I come out of this match with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when we go, into it a little bit more detail, it's looking at what Fulham did well offensively and defensively. And Sunderland are no mugs. They've proved that this season. They've come up. They bought some very good players. All right, you could say they were slightly unlucky yesterday with the injuries that they sustained and picked up, and obviously we picked up a one as well, which was a real shame. But look, at the end of the day, as I said, you get set up in a certain way. Marco Silva approached the game in a way that meant that our attacking players hopefully could affect the game, and they did, and they did so in the best way possible. So ultimately, it was a good result considering they've only lost once at home this season. I think it was Liverpool who beat them. So to be the second team to go there and beat them shows that, again, great resilience. As I say, not a particularly great performance, certainly first half, but second half, they did what they had to do.
Right. And again, that's what it's basically about. And what's interesting is listen, we talk often. It was a game of two halves, right? And I think it was played out that way, and we'll go through that. But the bottom line is that they found a way to win, and I think that they were set up to win. And I think that, to me, is why I felt the confidence. I had a feeling Marco would have them set up correctly, and I had a feeling, nothing against the manager of Sunderland. He's still new to the league, new to how things go. Sounds like what's based on what they did. He tried to change things up with his lineup, the way that they played, started two wingers, which he hasn't done prior, those two wingers. So he was trying to change things up. It just didn't come off. So again, full credit to Marco Silva, all the players, for getting a job, and it was a job well done. And we'll go through that now, my friend. So let's go through Cottage Talk talking points. And let's start here, Tony, because you and I talked about this after the match. And I think this is where we should start. Because of the victory, does this keep Fulham in contention for Europe? My answer is hell yes.
Absolutely. When you look at the fixtures coming up and the games that Fulham have to play, I would say that yesterday was, absolutely critical, because it keeps us on the front foot in that sort of area. Next game up for Fulham at home, Tottenham. The way they're going at the moment, you would expect us to get a result of some sort there. And then you've got West Ham, Nottingham Forest and Burnley, so you couldn't ask for a better four fixtures in your next games, coming. Obviously, all of those teams will be fighting for their life. That's the difference. So
right.
you would expect some resistance, but in truth, the way that Fulham are playing, and the way that we took care of those teams over that Christmas period, I don't expect Fulham to be dropping too many points in those games. So you get 12 points from those games, Russ. You are well in the mix for Europe for sure.
Right. Now, it's funny because I was just looking at what's left, right? And to be honest, Fulham being on 37 points, it might take, again, we were looking at this last year, 60. So we're talking still, they would have to win a significant amount of matches, but the matches in front of them, like you said, gives them a platform. And like you said, they should not be, let's just be honest, should not be dropping a lot of points. They should be winning a lot of these matches. Could there be a draw in here? Could there be a loss in there? Potentially. But that is, again, they should have full confidence that they can take the matches coming up, including the FA Cup.
100%. I mean, obviously the FA Cup is important as well. So, they've got a really good opportunity there. So this is where Marco Silva earns his dough, Russ. He's got to get the balance right. He's got to get the squad rotation right. He's got to approach games, very tactically, because, as I said, every game from this point on now is huge in terms of the 3 points. And yeah, of course, there'll be games where we will drop points because, unfortunately, from a defensive point of view, we are vulnerable at times, and against better sides than Sunderland, they will expose us and they will punish us. And Sunderland did have a few opportunities yesterday that they didn't take, where they could have and should have punished us. So I expect tougher games to come. But as I said, the next 4 games, if you look at the opposition and where they are in the table, you would expect Fulham to be, confident that they can go into those matches and get the results required.
Totally agree. And listen, I'm a very positive person. I'm feeling pretty confident now with the upcoming fixtures, and I think we should all be excited. It's not just about the FA Cup. It's about Europe. You can have both because, again, the lead up to this match, I kept hearing, again, going back to that Stoke City match with the stuff at halftime after the Stoke City match, basically saying our season's over, our season could be over. And I'm thinking, even if they lost, I wasn't going to consider it over because there's a lot to play for. And I want to see if this is the bucking the trend, Tony, of Marco's teams having a bad second half of the season. The players are there. The depth is there. They should be able to do it this time. He should be able to buck this trend.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, winning is a habit. And if you're winning constantly, it's a good habit to be in. look, Fulham came into this game against Sunderland, Russ, obviously putting the Stoke result aside. They came into that game off the back of 3, defeats. Man U, Everton, and a really pathetic performance against Manchester City. So, fair play and credit to Marco Silva for, getting his team right, getting them up for it, and making sure that they took care of business, and certainly had to galvanise them second half after what I thought was a really poor first half from both sides, to be honest. And it could have gone either way. But in the end, as I said, Fulham showed a good resilience, dug in, took their chances really, really well, were clinical. And I think that was the key yesterday. They were clinical at key moments. And, they're going to have to show that. They're going to have to show their teeth in the next 3 or 4 fixtures for sure. Because, as I said, we're playing against teams that are fighting for their lives. Yep. And Tottenham desperately, desperately need a result on Sunday. So they're going to come to the Cottage absolutely up for it. And it's not going to be an easy game. It's not going to be easy. But Fulham, on their day, Russ, we know they can beat anyone. And it's down to them. It always is. It always is down to them.
It is. And that's really what's different here. Because when I first started supporting Fulham, Tony, it wasn't going to always be like that, especially in the Premier League. You would need some luck. Fulham are now at the point where they could beat anyone and they could get beat by anyone. So it's really both, okay? So it really comes down to how are you going to perform on the day? And, that's why we're going through this match. We ripped through the performance positively and negatively, even after a win, because we want better for our club. So we're going to be honest. We're not just going to just sugarcoat and say, oh, what a great performance. No, we're going to tell you what we liked about it, what we didn't like about it, even if they won. That's what we do on Cottage Talk. All right, let's move on. I think you're going to like this next one, my friend. And I'm going to put you on the spot. You've been supporting Fulham longer than me, so here we go. Oh, I just missed it. Where did I just moved it around. Where did I just put it, Tony? So really, here it is. Okay, so there's a gold one for you. Do you think Raúl Jiménez is the best of taking penalties in your time supporting Fulham? 13 out of 13, my friend.
Yeah, look, I mean, the stats speak for themselves, Russ. The guy is ice cool. And he's proved that. I'm still trying to rack my brains as to, the last few seasons, why they let Andreas Pereira anywhere near penalties when this guy, when this guy literally, but look, he's an absolute master. Cool as a cucumber, absolutely fantastic composure. And, there will come a time when he will miss. It's going to happen at some point. But whenever he steps up, Russell, whenever he puts that ball down, I'm like, that's a goal. We're 1-0 up. That's it. We're in, because he just doesn't. You just don't have any fear at all about him stepping up and fluffing it. So yeah, I would say without doubt, he is probably the best penalty taker Fulham have ever had, without any shadow of a doubt.
Okay, Danny Murphy was pretty good too. Danny Murphy.
Yeah, he was. Unfortunately, I think he missed one, didn't he? Or
he did against Manchester City.
Yeah,
but they scored.
So he was up. He's up there for sure. Because to be a bit harsh, he's 19? Did he say 18 out of 19? He
something
scored,
like that.
Yeah, he's going to be up there, obviously. But at the moment, in terms of Raúl, and I think he'll get a few more penalties before he leaves.
Oh yeah,
hopefully, he could well get 15, 16 and keep on going. So yeah, he's without doubt a legend in that regard.
Okay, so that actually gets me to ask the question: why was Mitro so bad at this?
Listen, every striker likes to think they can take penalties, right? And look, Mitro was okay, but sometimes he just, he rushed it, or he didn't pick the right spot or area. But Raúl just knows exactly what he's doing. His technique, he obviously works on it constantly. And what they say, if you work on something and you perfect it, it's almost like saying, at the moment he's almost perfected the art of taking penalties. And at the end of the day, if he takes it in the right spot, the keepers have got no chance.
Right. Very good there, my friend. All right, let's move on and let's talk about this. This really discusses the second half, and this is something that you've talked about a great deal. And I think this has at times been a little bit of an issue with Fulham. Keeping the foot on the gas, meaning if you get a lead, build on the lead. And I think some of it is what I would say intent. What is your approach after you score a goal? Tony, the approach after they scored that first goal was to go forward, to force an opportunity for a second goal. And we had that with the penalty, right? But for me, it has a lot to do with the approach. Keep the foot on the gas. And I think that was key to this victory.
Absolutely. Yeah, they 100% kept going. I think Marco Silva's team talk at halftime would have been critical. But I think that in order to give yourself a platform and a structure and a foundation to win a game of football, Russ, your shape has to be really compact. And one of the reasons why we ended up getting the result we did yesterday is because defensively, our structure was really solid. I think we stayed very disciplined when we were out of possession of the ball. And we reduced the danger from Sunderland from crosses and made them sort of go, very central at times. And that helped us and it worked. And I think Marco Silva got that spot on. And that then allowed us, obviously, with the counter attack when we won, to really, really hurt Sunderland. And then in those situations, you have to be clinical. And as I said, we were clinical. I'm sure we'll talk about Iwobi's finish and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you still have to put the ball away in those situations. And that, I think, was the difference really between the two teams yesterday, is that we were clinical in those areas and Sunderland weren't.
And this is very true. And listen, Sunderland had some opportunities. We'll definitely talk about them. We'll talk about the bad result that came from one of those opportunities, which I think is disgusting. We're definitely going to talk about that. But it's funny, I should have led the show by talking a little bit about this, because you had said this to me, and I think this goes to what we're talking about here. You said to me, I've heard this over and over again coming out of the match, and a lot of it coming from the Sunderland perspective, Tony. Well, Sunderland were poor. And I could say yes to that. Yes, they were poor, but I think it takes two to tango. I think Fulham had a lot to do with it. Putting the foot on the gas and basically having that intent, I think, is major to the victory. So yes, they were poor. Yes, they missed a few opportunities, but Fulham took advantage of theirs. And I think Fulham made it difficult on them to really play the way they wanted to play. We'll talk about the back four and Leno coming up next. But I think we need to give a lot of credit to how Fulham played. I understand that the majority feel that Sunderland were poor. But at some point, I look at both of the matches, Tony. We're now looking at two matches against Sunderland. At some point, you have to say Fulham have won over this side, the way they've played, and it has more to do with Fulham than it does Sunderland. That's where I'm going on this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you talk about it all the time, Russell, about Marco Silva out-coaching managers, right? And how important it is to win the coaching battle. And I think yesterday, Marco Silva, without any shadow of a doubt, won the coaching battle. And I think when you look at it, look, if we're being perfectly honest, I thought we were just as poor first half as Sunderland were, to be honest. We really struggled with their press. We're trying to play out from the back. It just didn't work. But what Marco Silva did yesterday, he was flexible in his tactical approach, in as much as he set Fulham up to be defensively compact and to hit them on the transition. And we did that really well. Even though Sunderland had more possession at times, they weren't able to convert it into meaningful attacking dangers. Whereas when we hit them on the counter, we moved with a lot of pace and purpose, and that caused them a lot of problems. What we also did in those transitions, Russ, is we exploited the space. And whilst, as I said, they were trying to break through us with possession, we were much sharper on the break, and especially second half, we upped the tempo. And I think that's what Marco Silva would have been saying at half time to them, is we need to up the tempo. We need to move the ball quicker. And that is what we did. And that is why we ended up, hurting them and basically causing the problems that we did in the end.
Okay. And actually, that's a good lead into what I wanted to talk about. Do you think this was a cagey approach by Marco, that first half, was to basically stifle them and then beat them on the counter, take advantage of their weaknesses? Do you think that's why we saw what we saw in the first half?
Maybe a little bit, but I just think that we were just slow to get started. And to be honest with you, it needed a little bit of a spark. And it didn't really happen. And in the end, I think we dropped to their level a little bit.
You said that to me.
Yeah, and with football, unfortunately, you can't turn it on and turn it off. You either start well, start on the front foot, are at it, you get your levels up. But what they were able to do at half time, Russ, whilst they were still in the game, is they were able to reset. And I think that's what Marco Silva would have said to them at half time is, look, we're still in the game. You know, arguably they could have been losing the game, but they weren't. They managed to keep in the game. Now it was about upping levels. Players had to up their, you know, performance levels, certainly in midfield and certainly in terms of, you know, when we were passing the ball into wide areas or going through midfield, it had to be sharper. It had to be quicker. And, you know, credit to the players, they stepped it up. And actually Sunderland, once we did that, they weren't able to react and they struggled to keep up with it. And as I said, in the end, that is what effectively, you know, won us the game.
Okay. Excellent, my friend. All right. Now let's talk about the back four and Leno. Okay. So interesting here. So we've got Tete, Sessegnon. Now we're learning that Jedi was dealing with a knock potentially. So he was not involved at all. I didn't know that at the time. And you have Bassey and Anderson. And if I remember correctly, when we did our preview, I think you said you thought Bassey would play because of his, if I remember correctly, physicality. I think that played itself and his pace going, is able to, and I think that played itself out. So I can certainly understand, even though I went with Cuenca, I can understand why Marco went in that direction. It actually worked out well. We can surely talk about Anderson, then of course talk about Sessegnon. But what did you make of their performance? Because I think they did their job.
I thought, look, defensively, as I said, I thought we were, you know, really, really good, really, really solid. I thought Bassey and Leno were fantastic yesterday. I really do. And, you know, it makes me laugh because 2 weeks ago or even a week ago, you know, there were Fulham fans saying Leno needs to go. Leno needs to be replaced.
Crazy.
Leno's finished. Leno's done. Leno this,
I'm
Leno
still,
that. Leno.
By the way, I'm still,
you know, look, give your head a wobble, right? At the end of the day, goalkeepers make mistakes. That is part and parcel of being a goalkeeper. And they'll always be remembered for you know, the rickets that they make. Ultimately, over 38 games, you are not going to find a better goalkeeper than Bernd Leno at Fulham's level, by the way. Being realistic, talking about the top 5 or 10 goalkeepers in the world,
right?
You are not going to get a better goalkeeper than Bernd Leno. And you know what? I'll put up with his odd mistake here and there or a little bit of distribution that goes a bit woeful. Yesterday, he was absolutely fantastic. Calvin Bassey was one of the main reasons why Fulham ended up winning that game yesterday. His energy, the amount of clearances and duels that he won, and also Joachim Andersen, to give him his due. You know, I'm not his biggest fan, Russell. I don't, you know, I still think he's a weak link for us. But to be perfectly honest, they both marshalled the back line very well. I thought Sessegnon was excellent. Forget about the penalty. You know, it was a moment of madness. It happens. Okay, forget it. And Tete was solid. And, you know, if you win your duels and you clear the danger, then you nullify the opposition. And we don't defend like we did yesterday. We need to show those defensive qualities a lot more because we are capable. But the problem with us is that occasionally, or more often than not, Anderson switches off, Bassey switches off, you know, and that causes us problems. Yesterday, they were much more concentrated, much more on it. And when Anderson stops trying to be Baresi out the back and knocking his 40, I mean, his first 2 balls that he played straight out of play.
Oh, that was
drives me absolutely insane. So just stick to what you're good at. So, marshal, organise, win your duels, clear the danger, job done. And they did that yesterday.
Okay, and I just want to point this out because Brian Bobby, is it Brobby or Bobby? It's Brobby. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. There's a golden for you. Brian Brobby played a role in this. Again, we'll talk about what happened with Calvin Bassey with the penalty, but overall, I think they did a great job of neutralizing him. They didn't offer a lot.
They've had 2 shots on target all game, Russell. That's it. 2 shots. So they must have done something right. And you know, you're nullifying a team who are meant to be very strong at home, have scored goals. And in the end, you know, their only goal came from our mistake. Again, a penalty that we've given away. But from open play, we've kept them quiet. And that is your defense doing their job.
Absolutely. Good stuff, my friend. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about something that I've not had an update on. I've not seen anything. It looked bad. So let's talk about Kevin, right? So Kevin, I thought, was a bright spot in the first half. Kevin seems like he's coming into his own, Tony. I thought he should have done better on that opportunity in the first half. Definitely should have done better. but the confidence level is there. But he got injured, and it looked bad. I have not heard an update. I think the comments coming after the right after the match from Marco weren't great. They're going to assess, but let's just say he is out for an extended time. What does this mean for Fulham?
Yeah, first of all, absolutely gutted for the lad, because you talked about confidence. You were starting to see this boy really starting to show what he's about. His confidence was growing. He's on a good run of form in terms of performance, and then obviously now suffers this what looked like innocuous injury. And knowing a little bit about football injuries, it's hard to see, because I've looked at it, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6, 7 times, and it's hard to see what he's done. But it looks either his metatarsal, the top of his foot, or he was holding the bottom of his heel. So it could be Achilles related.
Hope it's not an Achilles.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, it's not as bad as people are thinking it might be. Hopefully, he just got his foot caught in the turf a little bit, and he twisted it. Hopefully it's not as bad as we think, Russ, but it was just something out of nothing, really. And it'd be a real shame. Obviously he will be a miss. Of course he will, because, he's a player that started to come into his own in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks, and he was only going to get better, right?
Right.
Now this potentially set him back a little bit. But we are blessed in that area. So whilst we'll miss him as an individual, we've still got enough quality in those areas to hopefully, cover with Bob and Chukwueze and,
that's right,
and Wilson. So yeah, in that regard, it's not such a bad miss. But for him personally, yeah, gutted, and hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Right. I look at this more like on a personal level. As a player that's trying to make his mark in England, big price tag, right? It's finally starting to click, and then this happens. Injuries happen. So let's hope it's not as bad as it might be, right? Let's hope. But as you mentioned, again, this goes to my confidence level with this side. So say we take him out, it's a blow. It looks like Samuel Chukwueze is dealing with something, but hopefully we'll be back soon. You just mentioned Harry Wilson. We obviously have Oscar Bob, who I think is going to be fantastic for Fulham. And guess what? You can also, if you had to, you could move a Wobie out there to a winger, and you could also play Ryan Sessegnon. You have options. That's the depth. That's the reason why even losing someone like Kevin is not, it's not going to derail their season. It's just a disappointment, I think, for him personally. Because and also for the club, I'd like to see what he can offer. But you and I both said the best is yet to come, probably next season. And let's hope that the injury is not as bad that it is about next season, because it was almost going to prove us wrong. He was proving us wrong, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I love to be proved wrong. I really do. and it makes me happy, because look, at the end of the day, we were always it's about giving him the benefit of the doubt and giving him time. You have to give, these players time. They're young lads that are coming in from a new culture, new environment, everything. It takes time to settle. You cannot expect, these young lads to just hit the ground running. Occasionally it happens, but very rarely. And we talked about it for a very long time. And it's about giving him that time to settle in, bed in, give him the confidence, get his confidence levels up. And as I said, the last few months, certainly the last 4 or 5 weeks, you've started to see what the hype is about around this lad. And as I hope his injury is not too bad and he's not going to be out for too long, because it would be a real shame, because someone like that, who then has a long period out, then has to come back, get his fitness back, get his sharpness back, and almost has to start again. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a real blow, and I hope, as I say, it's not too serious.
Well, it's an interesting point, because I think we're seeing that a little bit with Anthony Robinson. I think he's struggling coming off of that injury, and maybe he re-aggravated something or came up with a new injury. And you got to be careful in these situations, because to come back to the player that you once were after an injury is something that it can be tricky at times. So let's hope that it's not that serious, but only time will tell. Hopefully we'll find out sooner than later the seriousness of this injury with Kevin. All right. Okay. Now I don't like to talk too much about the ref or VAR. I'd rather just talk about the football on the pitch, but sometimes there's a need to do that. And in this case, I listen to a lot of stuff. I like to know what the other side's thinking, my friend. So I listened to a lot of stuff from Sunderland. And I heard a lot of negativity with Craig Pawson, the ref, VAR, trying to figure out exactly why the decisions were made. So just from your perspective, how do you rate the job he did?
Overall, I thought he refereed the game relatively well. I mean, look, at the end of the day, any team that gets beat and decisions go against you, you're always critical of the referee and VAR because you feel that the games, they've gone against you and the decisions have gone against you. So you're a little bit more critical. The truth of the matter is, I thought in the main, he got most of the decisions right. I think VAR was spot on with pretty much all their decisions, and
Yep.
Ultimately, I didn't have an issue with it, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, there's certain things he might have been a little bit more sort of forthright with, but in the main, I've got no complaints, Russ. I thought he did all right.
I thought he did okay too. Again, this is the one thing, and listen, we do it as Fulham supporters as well. When Fulham lose, we tend to look at the decisions that have gone against us, and we look at the ref, we look at VAR. This is what you do. But I think at some point you also have to give credit to the other side. And that's one thing that you and I do. When Fulham lose, we might complain about the ref, but we'll say, you know what? I don't know, name your team, Arsenal. And I will tell you that the majority of stuff that I listened to did give credit to Fulham, did say, regardless of the calls, that Fulham would win. I just don't like the excuse making. I just don't like it. And I thought it's not what decided the match. And I think the calls were the right ones. The one that I do want to ask you about, and and again, I think it really is, is it a makeup call? So I'm going to ask you this. So the one on Calvin Bassey, it's a tug of the shirt. That's going to be called every time. You said to me, I asked you, I said, well, what about Ryan Sessegnon's situation? So let's just talk about that one, because I think in both cases, they're both diving. Okay. I'm going to say Ballard went down like a ton of bricks. Okay. But Sess had both of his hands on him. He lets go and the guy goes down. So penalty?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
100%. Look, I mean, what the player does actually, in my mind, is irrelevant. Ultimately, in those situations, Russ, if you're on a football pitch, if you're in the middle of the pitch
Yep.
and you do that to someone, it's a free kick, right?
Right.
And look, the reality is Sessegnon and Bob should have defended that situation far better than they did, right? And then once, the attackers pulled away, Sessegnon has panicked and lost his head and made a stupid decision. Yeah, it's soft, but it's a penalty, Russ. And likewise, the Calvin Bassett, it's a penalty all day long. Yeah. And I've been saying it for years. In the box, as soon as someone grabs your shirt, and they need to VAR need to be looking at this a lot more, because it goes on so much, and players get away with murder, right? It happens a lot. As soon as someone grabs your shirt and is pulling you, it's a penalty.
Yeah.
And whether Bassey goes down like a ton of bricks or not, at the end of the day, he's still got someone tugging on him, and he can't get away because the player's tugging on him.
That's
so
true.
It has to be a penalty.
So go back and watch it. I believe there's a second Fulham player that got his shirt tugged too. There are two of them. Go back and watch it, which is interesting. So it wasn't.
And then it's about the consistency, Russ, isn't it? And
yeah.
and if the referees pick up on it and start seeing it, then, as I said, you're going to get a lot of penalties in games because it goes on so much at corners, so much.
Yep, I totally agree. Okay, Tony, we're going to end Cottage talking points on a serious topic, and one that actually you brought up to me, and I told you we're definitely talking about this because it bothered me when I saw this after the match, and I've heard a lot of talk about it afterwards, and it's terrible. Okay, and let's talk about what happened to the young player for Sunderland, who missed a very good opportunity to score, and he got reportedly racial abuse after the match. There's no place for racism at all in any walks of life. But I want to talk about in this situation, this is terrible, man. And I'm glad that everyone is calling it out. The supporters of Sunderland are calling it out, and they should be calling this out.
I can't believe, Russ, that we are in 2026 and this shit, excuse my French, is
That's
still
okay.
going on. Is still going on in football. Not just football, in the world. First of all, I hope Romain Mundell is okay. Absolutely, there is no place for it in this. But you know what? I'm sick of the FA. They've been taking a knee for however many years. Kick it out. All this. They need to start getting tough on this situation, because it is absolute nonsense that players of colour, creed, religion, whatever, are having to still deal with this utter nonsense. If someone is racist, you ban them for life, you kick them out, you do not allow them to come in, whether they're players, supporters, whatever, and you need to start getting heavy. £1,000, £1,500 fines, whatever it is, because that's the only way you are going to deal with this nonsense. But taking a knee on a football pitch is utter crap. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It's not dealing with the problem, right? You're skirting around the problem. So finally, get on top of these trolls, these absolute uneducated idiots, and start dealing with it. Yep. That's the only way it's going to get dealt with. But if you keep skirting around it, then unfortunately you're going to have these situations. But honestly, Russ, I can't believe we are still living in a world where all this nonsense is going on. It drives me nuts. And it's just uneducated, ignorant idiots that just need to be dealt with.
And they need to be banned and fined and all of that.
Absolutely.
And the fact that it continues is very upsetting. When I saw this, at first I'm like, what is going on? Are you kidding me? The poor kid probably feels horrible that he missed an opportunity, right? And people are going to racially abuse it.
Exactly. Put it in perspective, Russ. It's a football match, right?
Right.
A guy's gone out there to give his best for his team, and he made a mistake, or not even a mistake. He just missed an opportunity. And like you said, then you've got people going on there racially abusing. I mean,
it's insane.
Think about it for 1 second. Honestly, what is the world? What world are we living in? Genuinely, it's absolutely mental.
It is, and if like I said, it's just something that there's no place for. And I definitely wanted to talk about it when I started seeing it on X after the match. Like I said, I saw the statement from Sunderland. I'm like, what is going on? And it still continues. And then we're going to continue to talk about it until something is done about it. No place at all. And unfortunately, that's how we're going to end Cottage Talk talking points, but it needed to be talked about. Okay. Coming up next, Tony and I are going to break down the match, but we're going to start by talking about the starting 11 coming up next. All right, Tony, let's get to it. Let's talk about the starting 11. What did you make of it before the match?
I thought we said it was pretty predictable, didn't we, Russ? On the pre-match, I think it was clear what Silva was going to do. The question mark was he going to stick with Cuenca, or was Bassi going to come back in? And he decided to bring Bassi back in. I think the midfield picked itself. Pleased to see Kevin start, and I thought, you know what, he's given us a good opportunity to go on and win the game. I don't think he could have really started any stronger than he did. Is the truth.
No, listen, I had no problem with the starting 11. I didn't know about the situation with Jedi before the match, and because that could have been a talking point about the decision to start Sess, but I had no issues with the starting 11. I thought it was the right starting 11. The only issue, like I said, I wanted Oscar Bob to start, but I understand why he went with Wilson, and Oscar Bob ended up playing anyways. All right, Tony, let's get to talking about the first half. And again, we talked a little bit about it, and we don't have to spend too much time talking about it. But the one thing that I do want to talk about, because we've already talked about how really it was not a lot to take away from, but I do want to talk about the two opportunities Fulham had. So for all of the, as I said, was it cagey the first half, or just like, no, you have the ball kind of stuff? Sess and Kevin both had opportunities to score. And Kevin's, I thought, was well, actually, they both were not terrible opportunities. So what did you make of these two chances?
The Cess one, I thought he should have scored, to be perfectly honest. I think someone with his quality, when he gets himself into that area, and I still back him on his weak foot. I thought he should have scored there, and I would have backed him to score there. Kevin, look, it would have been I think it would have been a great goal if he'd taken it. But yeah, we had opportunities, and look, I think there really wasn't much to talk about other than those two opportunities, and obviously the one that Sunderland missed. Right. I thought the first half was really poor, Russell. I thought we weren't really at it. As I said, we dropped to their level. I think also you have to take into consideration that there was a bit of a psychological edge, I think, for the players. They knew that, bar the Stoke game, they were coming off the back of three defeats. And I think that Silva's game plan he seemed to take the shackles off us a little bit, and we seemed to play with less pressure, but more efficiency, if that makes sense. But we weren't actually as efficient as we probably could have been, and certainly were more efficient in the second half.
I think there was an adjustment, Tony. I'm sorry to break in. I think there was an adjustment at halftime. I think there was
100%. So, and Sunderland just looked predictable, they became reactive as the match progressed, but they never really got above us on a level. So, I think it was important to stay in the game going into halftime so that Marco Silva could get them in, have his chat, sort some things out tactically, and then obviously come out second half and change it up a little bit.
Right. The one thing, Tony, that I do want to mention, and again, we've already talked about the injury to Kevin, which is unfortunate, but I do want to go back and just talk about the opportunity. It's the confidence now that he has to take that opportunity and to continue to play with no fear. And with everything that's gone on earlier in the season, to now see the confidence level, that to me, even though it was a miss, he's going to miss, I still liked the intent that he had there. That's all I wanted to say about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Tony. So now let's flip over to the second half, because there's much more to talk about in the second half. So no changes at halftime, but like you said, I think it was pretty obvious. And as we get into the half, the mentality, the approach was different. You've already said it, and honestly, it doesn't happen that often where we see a second half with Fulham where it starts not great. Well, we're going to talk about an opportunity that goes wide with Mundell, but it was a reaction to that I think is very positive. But when you look at it, and I'm just going to put it to you this way: if this kid puts it in the back of the net and gives Sunderland the lead, how different is the match?
I think it's very different because they have momentum, and obviously they get the crowd buzzing, they get themselves up, they get a bit of a boost, their energy levels go up, and suddenly it is a completely different game. I mean, that was a very, very critical and key moment in the game, Russ, for Fulham. Actually, a really, really critical game, because I think that miss galvanized Fulham and actually, made them sort of up it a little bit, up a gear, which they had to do. And I think actually it had the reverse effect on Sunderland. It was like, oh wow, it was like putting a pin in a balloon for them a little bit. So it was a real turning point in the game for sure.
That was a huge turning point, and that's going to lead to shortly afterwards. You've got just a good opportunity from Fulham to score here. Again, I believe this was the shot that got blocked. That Iwobi shot gets blocked, and it leads to a corner. But listen, we've been talking a great deal. This all goes back to Pereira last season about poor corners that were taken. This was from Iwobi. This was pinpoint corner, my friend. Just a wonderful delivery, and Jimenez still has him. And here's a guy that dealt with a serious head injury and scores on a header years later. I mean, that to me just shows you the type of person Raúl Jiménez. He just still plays his football and scores a wonderful goal. He can still get it done.
What do I always say, Russell, right? Raúl Jiménez is one of the best headers in the Premier League, right? I know it was a corner, okay, which is fine. But I always said to you, you get Raúl in the 18-yard box, 6-yard box, and you deliver crosses to his head, he will score goals because he is so effective in those areas. We don't do it enough.
No.
And the truth of the matter is, if we did it more often, not only would he be more of a threat and a danger, but he would score a lot more goals. And listen, it was a great corner, but also it was a very, very good header. And there's very few players in the Premier League that can, rise like that, get the angle and score headers like that. So yeah, absolutely terrific goal.
Okay.
And fully deserved for a striker, like I said, who works incredibly hard for the team and very often doesn't get the rewards that he deserves.
He might be the hardest working player on the team. You say that all the time.
Yeah.
Just does so much work that many might not realize how hard the guy works. And to see him be rewarded, and actually be rewarded twice, because now we're going to talk about the second goal, but he deserves it. And anyone doesn't see the value of Raúl Jiménez, I don't know what you're watching, because he's extremely valuable to Fulham. I'm glad that Rodrigo Muniz is back, but I'm also glad that we have Raúl Jiménez, who's done a tremendous amount at his age while Rodrigo Muniz was out. Just think about that. He deserves a lot of credit. Let's move on to the second goal. We've already pretty much talked about it. We talked about Raúl's scoring and how great he is taking penalties and the insanity that we were dealing with Andreas Pereira taking insanity. I mean, you and I could do 3 shows talking about that. But again, the lead up to it, Tony, the delivery. Oh, I want to go back. I mentioned this to you earlier. What led to the goal, this, as you would say, controversy that Harry Wilson wasn't fouled. I've watched it back. What do you make of this?
Yeah, you've watched it back probably. I haven't actually watched it back, so it's a difficult one for me to comment on as much as I'd like to give you an answer, Russ. But I think that ultimately, at the time, look, the referee's given the free kick, right?
Yep.
And the delivery. It's all about the delivery at the end of the day. That's what causes the panic in Sunderland's back line. And obviously, at the end of the day, we've taken full advantage of it.
Yep.
I know you think it wasn't a foul, or was a foul.
No, I think it was a foul, but it wasn't initially called a foul. That's where the whole controversy is, that Harry Wilson was making a big deal about it, but I've watched it back. He is fouled.
Right.
But for whatever reason, it wasn't called at the time. And then I think VAR might have gotten involved here to get in Parsons' ear and say, hey, listen, you need to look at this. And that he was fouled. And then next thing you know, it's a foul and we get a free kick. That's been the contention with Sunderland supporters. Yeah. I get that part of it, because they're like, well, it wasn't called initially. Sometimes people make mistakes and they have to review it, and then the right decision's made. And that's all I want to go on that. But that makes it 2-0. We've already talked about this. I want to talk about the effect of this. We're talking about the penalty. What did you make of? We've already talked about Ryan Sessegnon and Bauer going down. Forget about all that. Let's talk about the penalty itself. What did you make of Leno's chance to stop this? He did get a hand on it.
Yeah, look, it was a good penalty. Very powerful, and it would have been a great save. He did get close to it, but it's a lot of luck in those situations, Russ. He's gone the right way, but I think the power of the shot was just too much at that close distance. Power was always going to have the advantage. So yeah, look, it would again. It was a moment that you think, uh-oh, here we go. Fulham are going to throw away a 2-0 lead. Sunderland are back in it. But again, full credit to Fulham. They didn't crumble. They didn't panic. They reset. They went again. They kept their composure and kept trying to do the right things. And thankfully, got the all important next goal.
Absolutely, and we're going to talk about that coming up, my friend, because I don't know how many times I've seen this, and you've seen it probably more times than you want to mention in your lifetime, where up 2-0, and they always say 2-0 or a 2-goal lead is a dangerous lead because teams can come back on, once they score that goal, Tony, that's the danger, right? The danger is 2-1. This is where the danger time is. How do you react to 2-1? Because the momentum has completely shifted. It's all with Sunderland. You're thinking, even to myself, can they hold on? We've seen them fall apart. I don't know how many times. Not this time. And that to me is what's impressive. The counter here with, I'm going to give Harry Wilson a lot of credit here. The pass, this exquisite pass to Iwobi, but Iwobi had a lot to do here, man. This was not an easy shot. He had to get it right. Let's talk about the goal that put the match away.
Yeah, first of all, it's a great break from just outside our penalty area. Harry Wilson does fantastically well. First of all, to inject a bit of pace into that run, and then it became sort of like a 3v2 situation. And you've got to give Oscar Bob a lot of credit here as well, because his run also caused Sunderland a lot of problems there. But the pass from Harry Wilson, as you say, was exquisite, because it was just inside the defender. Iwobi still had to get there at a stretch. He managed to, and the finish is just sublime. Absolute quality finish. And we talked about being clinical, Russell. In that situation, that's where you need to be clinical, and we were, and that effectively put the game to bed. There was no way Sunderland were coming back from that once that goes in, and it was those moments, it's those situations where Fulham, have to be better. And thankfully, yesterday they got it right, and they were, because that killed the game.
It definitely did, Tony. So let's just talk about what happens after that. So you're a 3-1, and I'm still a nervous Fulham supporter. I'm not going to lie to you, but it's 3-1 with, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 minutes plus 9 minutes of stoppage time. I do want to mention this because I've heard a lot of talk on this, and I understand the outrage by some Sunderland podcasters I was listening to. After that goal goes in, that place emptied out. So many left. It's 3-1. And basically that put the match away. But how did you see Fulham seeing the match out?
Like I said, concentration levels had to be, spot on. You've got to credit Marco Silva again for his game management, because, at the time, I think...
And I don't mean to break in, but he does make a substitution to go 3 at the back.
Yeah, he brings on Kearney, Cuenca and Castagna. I think that then helped maintain the defensive structure, close the game out without inviting any extra pressure. Kearney, when he gets on the ball, he can keep it, look after it, slow things down, speed things up, do whatever he needs to do to take control. Cuenca comes in there also very composed on the ball. And yeah, look, he brought those changes in to see the game out and make sure that we didn't do anything silly or get opened up. But I think once that third goal went in, Russ, Sunderland, their heads went. They knew they were a beaten team, I think, at that point. There was no coming back for them. Okay.
And I would agree with that. And again, great 3 points from Fulham Football Club. And I was very happy with this. I know I predicted it, and I'll say it one more time. It didn't play out the way that I thought it was going to play out, but I'll take 3-1. I'll take Russ Goldman right again any time of the week. Okay. It doesn't happen often. So I will take it. But more importantly, the big thing for me had to be, it's almost, I hate to go here, Tony. We say this when I watch the Patriots. I know I'm using a different sport. I got to have it play. You got to have it to win the game. You got to have it. This is one of these guys. This is a got to have it game. You got to have it if you are serious about getting into Europe. You got to have it, because if you don't get this one, Sunderland are now where Fulham are at this point. So there's a big swing here. So they had to have it, and they got it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a mentality thing, Russ. And there's been times where Fulham have shown that great mentality to see a game out and get the result done. And there's been times where they haven't. The amount of goals we've conceded in the last 10 minutes of games this season where it's actually cost us. So it's about finding that consistency. And I'm sure Marco Silva has been tearing his hair out at times this season, thinking, how did we throw that away? How did we let that go? And it does come down to concentration levels and making sure that you are switched on for the 90 plus minutes, whatever it is, to see the game out.
So let me ask you this, because the one match that just sticks in my craws, we would say over here, is that Everton match. The Everton match why do we see what we saw against Sunderland and we saw that against Everton? Is this just, as we would always say, Fulhamish? Is this just, like you said, is that what this is?
Yeah, Fulhamish is mentality. It's basically, that's what it is. It's having the ability to stay concentrated for the length of time that the game goes on for. And unfortunately, whether it's fatigue, mental tiredness, whatever it is, we switch off at key moments, and that's what Marco Silva needs to address. And I think he's clearly working on it. But the players need to stay concentrated and switched on all the time, especially in those key moments heading towards, the end of games or when games are close, to make sure that they, stay switched on, don't lose a man at a corner, make sure they compete at all times. And, we did it really well second half yesterday, but it's about carrying it on and being consistent and making sure that we can, do it more regularly.
Yeah, I hear you, man. All right. Good stuff. All right. Great show as always, but we have to end with man of the match. I'm very curious. Who's your man of the match, my friend?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Look, for me, a lot of people will be talking about Harry Wilson, Calvin Bassey. I thought was really good, and also Alex Iwobi, who was fantastically effective in linking play and delivered some great quality. But for me, Russ, my man of the match has to be Raúl.
Okay. I get that, man. I get that. The hardest working Fulham player. We're going to call him the hardest working Fulham player.
Look, he scored a great opener with his head. His positioning, I thought, was excellent yesterday. He was always a threat aerially. His penalty was fantastic. And his overall hold-up play really helped us to sustain, some really good positive attacks. Yep. And I think the amount of work he puts in, he deserved those 2 goals yesterday, and I think his overall performance warranted man of the match.
Okay. Me. I understand that, and for me, definitely in the running, but I am going with Calvin Bassey, partially because Calvin Bassey comes back in. I've been just chiming for Cuenca because I really enjoy what Cuenca can offer, but the opponent who Fulham were playing against, as you rightfully talked about, this was probably the right opponent to have Calvin Bassey in there, and he played exceptionally, and he deserves a lot of credit. I'm going to give it to Calvin Bassey. I'm glad you mentioned Harry Wilson. I do want to mention a couple things before we go, because one interesting thing that I always see after a match, especially when you rate players, when you look at ratings and you talk about players' performances, I'm going to talk about a couple players that if you read one thing, someone thinks one thing. If you read another, they think another about the same player, the same performances. I'm going to talk about these 2 players, Sander Berge and Alex Iwobi. I'm telling you, you get different views of the match we watched. Some thought that both played well. Some thought both played terrible. So what do you make of that?
I think the reason we got that because we had such a poor first half and then, a completely different second half. It was weighing up, who did what and did the best within those 2 periods. Look, I thought Iwobi obviously got better as the game went on. And certainly second half was at the level that you want him to be, every week. Sander Berge, for me, Russ, I just think he's a steady 6 every single week. That's what he is. He's a 6. He's just a steady 6. And do I believe we have more efficient, effective players that could go in there and do that job? 100% yes, absolutely. I think Harrison Reed, for me, would give us so much more in there. But obviously, look, Marco Silva feels that he offers something. And at times he does. But that's all it is. It's just a consistent level of 6. And if you're happy with that, that's absolutely fine. Personally, I'm not. Okay. I think we could get a lot more out of a different player in that position. But look, at the end of the day, he played a pivotal role in a good victory. So he obviously did something right.
Okay. So if I'm looking at a 6, we could call it mediocre to adequate, right? Kind of in between. Yeah. It's not average. It's between mediocre, bad, and average. So it's kind of in between. So And you can kind of expect that kind of performance. So the problem is that's usually where he lands. I understand where you're going, and that you don't want, and many, I think, feel that Fulham could do better at the position, and you could be right. This is just who he is. And I think I've kind of accepted that in the role, but I understand wanting something better. And I understand why you feel that way, Tom. But I'm glad that we could talk about that, because I've seen different discussions. And the same thing with Sessegnon. I personally thought Sessegnon played well. I've seen people think that he hasn't. So
no, he was excellent yesterday.
I thought he was very good.
He was excellent.
Besides that, I thought he played well. And between us, if you check on X, you'll see me going back and forth with a writer from The Athletic. I'm making the claim that I believe Ryan Sessegnon is the better player than Jedi. Now, that's just my personal feeling. He disagrees. So I'm trying to get him on the show. Hopefully I can get this gentleman on the show. We can have a debate about Jedi versus Ryan Sessegnon. I would love to have that debate. I reached out to him. So hopefully this writer from The Athletic will reach out to me so we can have a healthy debate on this, because you and I have talked a lot about it. Anyways, final thoughts before we go, my friend.
Final thoughts. Look, great win. Hopefully the boys will train well this week. And then, Russ, I love this game. I love welcoming Tottenham to the Cottage. So
I know you do.
They are in complete disarray, and I am looking forward to us just absolutely dismantling that group of players. And if Marco Silva gets it right, and we, play the way that I know that we can, honestly, we should get a really good, positive result on Sunday against them. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay. The one thing I want, I should say two things. Obviously, I want a Fulham victory, but I want a goal and assist from Ryan Sessegnon. That would just make my day. Okay?
Definitely.
Goal and assist for Ryan Sessegnon against Spurs would just be wonderful for me. So that's what I'm hoping for. Anyways, as always, my friend, great show. Fantastic show. And sorry about the situation we're having with X, but apparently, my friend, because kind of did a little work behind the scenes before we went live, we've had a lot of people watching on YouTube. In fact, over 1,000 have viewed this show. And I kind of tried to work things with some friends to get them to retweet and post some stuff that we were going to be live on YouTube, and it actually worked. So I want to thank everyone that has watched live on YouTube, and thank you very much. And of course, Wayne's joining us late. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Wayne. Just as we're about to wrap this up. All right. He's Tony Gold. I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the TalkSport Fan Network.